Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. You know, in 2012 and 2015, this year as well, Myanmar, or Burma as it's known, was a bright spot in the world. You were seeing a building of democracy in a country that had only seen the brutal junta for decades. And yet there is a part of Myanmar that was dark and seems to get darker by the day. We're going to talk about the plight of the Rohingyas this afternoon. And over the next 20 minutes, speak not just about what it means to see a complete invisibling of a problem. I know I'm making up the word over there, but that's the only way you can describe it. When you speak about refugees, we all know the groups we speak about. We've heard some tragic and brutal stories this afternoon about the refugee crisis the world faces. But we really don't speak about the Rohingyas. And they're right here, they're right in our neighborhood, and they should affect not just us, but really the entire world. I'm joined this afternoon by some very special people. I'll start with you, Lillian. Lillian Fan is the International Director of the Gatanyu Foundation. It means our people. Saiful Haq Omi is the founder of Counter Photo, and I think is a brilliant example of the fact that even those who document the situation that we are dealing with are so personally affected themselves, and we will come to that. And our very special guests here are Omar and Nizamuddin. You know, they came to India about a year and 2 years ago, and they have a special story because Omar and Nizamuddin both took care of refugees inside Myanmar, inside the Rakhine state, where so many live inside a concentration camp. Last count, there were close to 140,000 people who lived in what they call open-air prisons, sequestered areas for this ethnic population that is not even recognized inside Myanmar. We'll hear about why people in Myanmar refuse to speak about them or shun their cause. But I want to start with you, Nizamuddin. Tell us just a little bit about how it was. You were actually an activist yourself. You were helping refugees, and now you are one.
You know, my name is Nizamuddin. I am from the NRS. So it's called the Northern Rakhine State in Myanmar, west part of the Myanmar. So actually, why I live, basically I want to tell my story. I will start with my story that, you know, I left right after the ethnic violence in Rakhine State. You know, the 969, one of the Rakhine group, start attacking to the Muslim community. At that time, the government force, the government police also joined with them. They start burning the village and enter to the houses and arrest the young boys, young people, and then rape the women. And also looted all the whole materials inside the home. And they looted also in the market. They went into the market and loot everything from the market and kill everywhere. And it was started in 8 June 2012. It was on Friday, 8 June 2012. They start from, it start from Mongdo. Is really border from the Bangladesh. It is spread within 1 or 2 months. It is spread everywhere. You know, at that certain time, the UNHCR and also the other NGOs, they surrender, and it was started on 8, and on 10, the UNHCR and other international staff announced that their work was terminated. And they wrapped their bags and ran to their homes. I work at that organization. At that time, you know, I was as a girl hostel supervisor. I have only girls, 77 girls. They are multi-ethnic, not only Muslim. We have many ethnics at that time. I was a hostel supervisor. So the UNHCR just leave the announcement, but my hostel girls are still in the different hostel in different area where I cannot reach to there. There is also the no phone communication, also no internet access. People cannot go out from the home. Even the life is risky. Even my home family, my sisters, my mother, all my family go to another village thinking that it will be safer for them. It will be safe from the attack of the extremists and burning. So, at that, I have, I could not contact with the UNHCR, my supervisors, for their financial and for their security. So what I think is, it's my challenge, it's my time to challenge to save their life. Even the multi-ethnics. So I managed with some stuff. I could send first to the other, except Rohingya. The rest of the girls I could send easily because for them it's easy for transport. For the Muslim girls, so they cannot go because Muslims are not allowed for traveling at that time. So I have to keep at my home. 30 girls I have to keep with my home.
And you have 3 young daughters.
I have also 3 young daughters.
Yourself. Can I just ask Omar, आप मुझे बता रहे थे, Omar speaks Hindi. She works, in fact, as an interpreter with some of the Rohingyas that are over here. There are about 13,000 across the country, some of them in custody, some of them living in how we will show you in the sort of conditions they have to live in compared to where they used to be. Omar, आपकी 3 बच्चियां हैं, आपको काम करना पड़ रहा है अभी. आपको सबसे ज्यादा आज डर क्या लगता है?
मैं अभी बॉस्को में काम कर रही है, लेकिन मेरा हस्बैंड हम दोनों बच्चे को छोड़कर ऑफिस जाना है. मेरा 3 बच्चा है, एक छोटा है 3 साल का और 2 से थोड़ा बड़ी है. वो स्कूल जाती है तीनों, तो हम सुबह तो स्कूल में भिजवाती है, तो आफ्टरनून को लेने में बहुत प्रॉब्लम है. मेरा हस्बैंड भी कभी कभी वो केस में लेट हो जाती है. मैं भी कभी कभी बहुत दूर हॉस्पिटल जाना है, इसीलिए वो लोग आने जाने में भी बहुत मुश्किल है. तो रास्ता में तो कुछ हो गया, वही प्रॉब्लम है. हम लोग सेफ्टी नहीं है. एक दिन भी मेरा घर में एक आदमी आके ऐसे घूम के चले गई, तो मेरा बेटी ने भी कुछ नहीं बताया. हम लोग ऐसे रह रही है और छोटा सा रूम में. हम तो यहाँ पे हमारा बर्मा का बाथरूम भी सिर्फ यहाँ पे एक ही रूम में रह रही है और सेफ्टी भी नहीं है. बहुत डर लगती है क्योंकि मेरा 3 बेटी है, तो दोनों ऑफिस जा रही है और रास्ता में कुछ प्रॉब्लम हो गई तो बच्चा को हमको भी नहीं पता होगा, इसीलिए बहुत डर लगती है. हमारा सेफ्टी नहीं लगता है.
I think this is really what so many who have documented the problem have worked with. Lillian, you were speaking to me earlier about this, that it's not just about escaping with your life from the area where you are under threat and under such dire threat, but that sense of insecurity continues. Refugees, you were saying, are actually under the greatest threat, especially of sexual violence.
Yes, Suhasini, I think it's critical to realize that the Rohingya face an incredible amount of danger and oppression within Rakhine State. They are deprived of basic rights, including citizenship, and every other right that is extended from that right of citizenship, education, health. But their journey as they flee Rakhine State and try to come to many of our countries, including Bangladesh and, of course, our countries in the ASEAN region, the precariousness with which they live and the violence that they're exposed to does not end, actually never ends. There's no single point of destination, even if they arrive in their intended destination, which in the ASEAN region it tends to be Malaysia. At no point are they ever secured. None of our countries have signed the Refugee Convention. In ASEAN, there's only 2 countries, which are Cambodia and the Philippines, and those are both countries that actually don't receive a lot of Rohingya refugees. And the countries where you have the largest numbers of Rohingya, there's absolutely no protection whatsoever. Sometimes you have sort of ad hoc protection. But if you look, for example, at the cases that were very widely highlighted in the media of these boats that were abandoned in the Andaman Sea recently, I mean, just imagine how many months people had been suffering on those boats. So first, you're born in Rakhine State, and you lead a life for however many years where you're under, a situation of apartheid, stripped of citizenship, statelessness, deprived of every single basic right. Then you choose to take a boat. These are people who make that choice to take these incredibly risky journeys and expose yourself to actually months of living in basically floating concentration camps. And that's exactly what these ships are. These are boats where you have thousands of people crushed together, basically living shoulder to shoulder. Many people died just because of the conditions on the boat. Insufficient food, insufficient water, no medical attention. There were women giving birth on these boats, of course, children dying, and many people actually just dying because of malnutrition. And then finally, maybe you arrive, or what happened in May was that the boats tried to arrive in Thailand and Malaysia, and in fact there was a crackdown on trafficking because there were these mass graves that were found on the border of Thailand and Malaysia, and that then resulted in a crackdown. So the boats couldn't disembark, they couldn't land, and therefore the brokers who were on these boats sort of abandoned them. And that is when you really had a severe humanitarian crisis where people were starving on these boats. There was no food, there was no water, and not a single country in the region was willing to lift a finger to rescue these people. And, here we are talking about, Asia being, sort of the pioneers of, leading development in the world and sustainable development and all of this, but we can't even save people, right? And which is, to me, was shameful. And with one of the things that I saw from my organization, because we're based in Aceh, Indonesia, which was the place where the tsunami hit. It was a place that was faced with 30 years of civil war, actually. But it was fishermen from Aceh, 3 times, who actually went out on their own to save these people at sea. They didn't know who the Rohingya were. They didn't know that they were Muslim. For them, it was a pure humanitarian impulse. And I think that that's something that's important. If we can identify people in the region who are willing to do that kind of humanitarian.
I think that is the most powerful thought, that those who have so much more are unwilling to help, but those who really suffered loss themselves were those that came through the most. Let's just take a look at where Omar and Nizamuddin live in Delhi. We're just going to bring up a clip of that. When Omar said very modestly that the place I used to stay was, even the bathroom over there was larger than the place I stay now. I think what earlier panelists spoke about, that loss of dignity, that loss of your sense of your own place, leaves a very lasting scar. I'm just wondering if we could take a look at the video clip we have. It's interesting for me as a journalist, and the first time I went to Myanmar in 2012 to cover the elections, was the euphoria one felt about the fact that so many refugees who had fled from Myanmar because of the junta were now going back. So I met a lot of refugee families in Delhi who were packing up their homes and going back. Yet it coincided with the time when so many, like Omar and Nizamuddin, were actually having to flee their countries. And that's what makes it so poignant, that here is a country at the doorstep of a new day, and there is this very dark corner in there. Nizamuddin, when you look at your life before and you look at your life now, what is the thing that really strikes you the most?
Actually, when I was in our country, I feel no matter what happened, I am facing a lot of difficulties in our country, even in every kind of the human right, basic human right. But we are still fit. We were born there. That was our country. So now we feel that where is our country in this global? Where is our part? If my children, my small children, ask me, Father, where is my place in this global? I have no answer. I would be silent on that. So the situation in this area is also, India is also not signed on 1951 Refugee Convention. So, and we face a lot of difficulties. We stay in the where there is dirty place. Rohingya look a place to make the man-made ship, man-made cart, You know, where there is that no access to health, no access to the school, where there is no school, they have always to shift from this place to another place because that land was not either recognized by government. Is that government land or is that somebody's land? People don't know. They just stay because they can stay for some days without any payment. They make a small hut and they are surviving on that way.
And you feel the most that you're letting down your children.
Yes, well, I am feeling especially for the children. What will be their future? They, you know, we are of course we are passing on this way, and there is no single Rohingya was decided as for the resettlement among the Rohingya refugees. We found some other refugees are going for other countries like American somewhere else. So when we ask about that, the host country like American, Europe, they don't accept us because we are stateless. We have no recognition. We cannot go somewhere else because we have no document. We have no passport.
And because your problem in many ways is an invisible problem. Saiful, you've actually documented so many, and we're going to look at some of the pictures over here that you've taken. So many stories that you've recounted for us that have had a huge impact on us. Tell us about the woman that you first saw in a Rohingya camp.
I mean, I want to first start to talk about a woman that I met in Malaysia last year. I have been photographing this community since 2009, almost 7 years. I think I can go on for the next 12 hours talking about my experience, but I want to start with the love story. I think that love story is probably the most tragic story I have heard, and probably one of the most tragic story you would heard. I met a family in Kuala Lumpur, and I was photographing them, going from one house to another. I ended up in a house where I found this happy couple. As like any other photographer who works on human rights, we do photograph things that are unpleasant. All of a sudden, I found a family who were young and happy. And I knew the kind of books that I will be bringing out, the kind of photographs I take, I will probably not put them in the final edit. But for the sake of my own, I mean, I was feeling sad and bad all the time. So I started to photograph them. But before I went to Malaysia, I was filming for Channel 4, and I was photographing the trafficking situation. So I knew about the trafficking scenario, and of course, in 7 years' time, I did a lot of work on research too. So eventually, I started to photograph this family and beautiful portraits of happy couple. And slowly we get into the story. And then the man told me that he knew this girl when he was in Burma. And first he left for Malaysia and waited for the girl to come in. And by the time this guy made it to Malaysia, he knew that how the journey was. At one point, this guy managed to start to talk to this girl who lives in northern Rakhine State. And at one point, they had to start talk about whether they will take the risk of being raped while she will be trafficked. Imagine a man talking to his girlfriend whether she is ready to take the chance where she might get raped. Before this story, as I said, I filmed secretly the boats that's been used by traffickers. I filmed the cage where if you go and talk to Rohingyas, I think Nizamuddin would tell you also, they would take the woman into that cage and they will rape them for weeks. And this guy knew that this is going to happen to them. So I started to talk to them, and I still remember the faces. When these things started to come up, I felt that the whole room was silent. And they looked at each other, and they never wanted to talk about it. So, you know, the story that started with like beautiful portraits, as I said, they're sitting together, going to cinemas. Suddenly it was a story that shocked me.
What is it about their situation back in Myanmar that they face that lets them able to, like this, have a conversation, say, what if I am raped on my way out? I will still try to get out of here. I'd like to play a clip. This is a very, very influential monk in Myanmar. His name is Ashin Viratu, and he belongs to the Mabata party, as it's known. Obviously, monks in Myanmar don't stand for election. They don't even vote. But they have a very, very strong political influence. I just want you to listen in to what this man, who really, really controls not just a religious following in Myanmar, but local politicians, local police, as well as many parts of the government actually had to say. Listen in. Now, I hear a lot of you sound just disgusted by this situation. Think about the fact that this is what they flee. But when they go out in the world, it's not as if Rohingyas really have a place anymore. As I said, this invisibling of an entire population of 1 million. We've seen it in 2015 during the elections this time. The Election Commission actually disenfranchised about 750,000 Rohingyas. They said they no longer are citizens, they no longer can vote. They took away their identity papers. People who have been a part of the legislature could no longer stand for election, nor could they even vote. This is not something that is happening away from the world's eyes. The world's eyes are on Myanmar today, and yet they are willing to put this aside. Lillian, just give me a sense of why that is. I know there was a Yale-based human rights center that said they had documented things inside Rakhine that could even qualify as genocide. Nobody wants to use that word, of course. But why is it so difficult to have people recognize the real problem of refugees from Rohingyas?
I think it's very difficult to understand what the debate is like inside Myanmar at the moment. I mean, here we are looking at this tremendous victory that Aung San Suu Kyi's party has just won. They've just won an enormous landslide. But I think what has been probably less reported internationally is that at the same time in Rakhine State, where the Rohingya are from, there was also a landslide, but it wasn't by the NLD. That was a landslide by the Arakan National Party with the ANP, which in fact is the ethno-nationalist party that is incredibly anti-Muslim and specifically anti-Rohingya. So I think that we are entering, on the one hand, certainly a time of pushing forward certain democratic reforms, but I think that we need to recognize what the limit of those reforms actually are at the moment. And the limit, there's several limits. One is that the Constitution itself, this entire reform process, was something that was designed by the military regime. I think we should never forget that. And there are very clear restrictions on what the actual parameters of these reforms are. But by the same token, I don't think we should be overly optimistic about Aung San Suu Kyi. I think that we really need to understand that, this mentality of being actually, very dismissive of the claims that Rohingya have towards citizenship is actually something that many pro-democracy activists, including Aung San Suu Kyi,
and it's interesting because she's such an icon,
yes,
icon for the world. I think we can listen into something she did say, which gives you a sense of where even an icon becomes a politician.
Because I have not condemned the Buddhists.
Daw Suu Kyi, when speaking about the Rohingya situation, when I spoke to senior party leaders, they said this is not the time. The priority is to win the election, and then let's see what we are able to do next. Nizamuddin, I know we have run out of time, so I do want to ask: are you still hopeful that there will be a situation? Myanmar is working towards a democracy. Hopefully, the NLD will show a new way?
Since 2012, we find no single word from Aung San Suu Kyi being a Nobel laureate in our country. We expected a lot from Aung San Suu Kyi, but he should tell something about us, about the crisis of the Rohingya. But he was quite totally deadly silent at that time. But he gave repeatedly an excuse that she had no power. Now she will get the power, but she has a lot of things to do to reform the country. So it is really waiting. We are just wait and see what will she do.
And Saiful, I'll leave the last word to you. That is the situation inside Myanmar, yet we here in India, as well as in Bangladesh, have not really done by the Rohingyas what we should have. You've documented some of this. Tell us about that.
Yeah, Bangladesh has been in the discussion since whenever the word Rohingya comes up. Again, but I think it's, again, very problematic because I think I have always felt and seen and documented that it is a regional problem. Nobody really mentions that equal number of Rohingyas are also in Middle East, as many as they are in Bangladesh, 500,000, more than 500,000. There are hundreds and thousands of them in other parts of the world. Bangladesh hasn't done enough, so has Burma, so has India, so has all of us. I particularly want to share one event that was, again, very heartbreaking. In 2012, during that genocidal situation, we still are not sure whether you use the word genocide, but when this happened, I was photographing in Bangladesh, in Cox's Bazar, in Teknaf, and I was the only man who was allowed to get in because I am not a foreigner, I don't have a white skin. And the people didn't know that I was the man who was literally working for all international televisions and channels. At one morning, I was right at the shore, and that time they found 139 people who tried to get into Bangladesh overnight. And they used, really, I have a video of that, broken boats. At that time, Bangladesh decided to close down the borders and decided not to let any Rohingyas get into Bangladesh. And they were men, only men, and mostly young men and boys, 139 of them. At one point, the order came in that they have to be pushed back. And as I said, I was the only man there. No Bangladeshi were working, so they thought everything the world would see will be in accordance to the government's position. At that moment, they decided to push them back and use the same boats that they have used, if you get a chance to see it. And then they were used to push them back, 139 of them, knowing that they have all the chances either to be in the hands of the people who has been persecuted, or persecuting them, or they will get drowned. Out of 139, and I must say that before, right when they announced that they will be pushed back, this large number of people who were waiting at the jetty started to cry, and I was photographing and filming. I, along with everybody else, knew that I am photographing people who will be mass executed within hours. During that 9 out of those number, 132 of them died. So it was a state persecution, I would say, and we pushed them back into the sea, knowing very, very well that probably all of them would die. And that's been filmed, and we are making a film next year, and that hopefully the world would see.
And I certainly hope as we look at the world's refugee crisis, we also uninvisibilize the Rohingyas. Ladies and gentlemen, may I get a round of applause for all our guests tonight? Thank you very much.